Hi, it's Alejandro for the Audio Brewers, and in this video we're going to explore our newest plugin, AB Stutter. Although this plugin can work like an ordinary Stutter plugin where you create glitches either tempo or time-based, AB Stutter was created with something much deeper in mind. We try to use this new sonic philosophy that I have been thinking of for the past couple of years, where you can use the three-dimensional properties of a sound for purposes other than location. So with AB Stutter, you can work with glitches at dimensional levels, which helps you create this psychoacoustic type of color in the sound that we like calling Impressionism in immersive audio, which will be when we grab the dimensions that could be used for location properties, and instead we use them to give our sounds different colors. So for this video, we have created a very simple project in which we have 4 tracks. One of them contains a mono wave file, another contains a pad, another contains a rhythmic arpeggio, and another one contains an immersive ambience. We're going to work with AB Stutter both in stereo and in Dolby Atmos so that you can see all the possibilities this plugin can offer you, whether you're working in a stereo or in an immersive project. So right now I'm going to work on a stereo setup, so all my tracks are routed to my stereo output. And the easiest way to work with AB Stutter will be to simply insert it in my effects chain. So I'm going to start by grabbing my first track and just listen to how it sounds dry. Okay, so you can hear that it's a mono file, some whispers, a very short file of 4 seconds. So I'm going to insert AB Stutter to my track. And because it's a mono file, I'm just going to make sure that my input is set to mono. My output is set to stereo because my track is going to my stereo out. And as soon as I insert AB Stutter, it sounds like this. I'm just going to describe what each of the controls of AB Stutter does. And then I'm going to start with the sound design part. So here you can toggle the dry signal on or off. Here you can control the volume of the wet signal, which is the stutters. You can reverse the stutters here. You can add or remove knee to each stutter slice. You can loop the buffer. This control is very interesting and is something that we have created so that we can help people that are using mono or stereo files which don't contain any three-dimensional information. And by using this knob, they can expand the energy so that neighboring dimensional planes can grab some of the sound. So it's sort of like creating immersive sound out of a sound that is two-dimensional otherwise. You'll see it working in a bit. Here you can control the size of the buffer, which can go up to 20 seconds. You can also control the rate of the stutter, and you can control if the stutter is tempo or time-based. So these are the basic controls, and I'm just going to go through each of them before I move on to the more advanced controls. So first of all, I'm just going to mute the dry. And because my file is very short, it's just of 4 seconds, I'm just going to make my buffer be maximum 4 seconds. That way, I am sure that my buffer doesn't contain any empty information. And finally, because my sound is only 4 seconds and I really want this sound to last, I'm just going to loop it, meaning that as soon as the buffer is full, AB Stutter will just be recycling this buffer instead of renewing it. So now with the loop buffer, I'm just going to press play and I'm just going to play with the rates a little bit, with the knee and with the reverse buttons. So as you can see, out of a 4-second file, I could manage to get something that can be infinite. So there are also spatial transformations to these stutters that work even in stereo. So if I turn my dry signal again, I'm just going to press play. And this time I'm just going to move my horizontal rotation so that you can hear the spatial transformation of the stutters while the dry signal remains untouched. So like this, you can expand your sound to stereo even though the original sound was only mono. Now, let's go and do something a bit more advanced. What if I wanted to detach my dimensional planes so that I can play with them independently? So that's the use of these buttons. Each of these buttons represents one dimensional plane. You have the omnidirectional plane, you have the width plane, which is left and right, you have the height plane, which is above and below, and you have the depth plane, which is in front and behind. So because this is a mono file, of course, there is no information in the sides and there is no information above and below. And this is exactly why this buoy knob is for. So if, for example, I wanted to create a pseudo stereo stutter, all I will have to do is just detach my sides. And if I press play, you hear that everything remains in the middle. But if I increase my buoyance, you can see that now, not only do I have the mid information, but I also have information in the sides. Let me just mute the dry, and I'm going to play with my sides and with the rest independently. So this starts becoming very interesting. Now, since I have my buoyance all the way up, I am sure that there is also information on my height plane and on my depth plane. So if I turn these controls on, I can also control them independently so that I create something even weirder. Finally, I can even mute each of the planes in case I just wanted to work with some dimensional planes and like that just sculpt my psychoacoustic weird kind of sound. So I'm just going to work with this little sound. I'm going to create something random and see what happens. So as you could hear, we managed to create such an interesting type of sound out of something that was just a monophonic recording. And this is what A/B Stutter can do for you when you're working with something that comes in mono. So right now you can expand your mono signal, not only using a reverb or a delay, but also by using our Impressionism in immersive audio concept. For this track, we have a stereo pad. So if I listen to it, it's just an ordinary pad. So I'm just going to insert A/B Stutter to it. And as soon as it's inserted, just like in the Whispers track, if I press play, you can hear that you have the stutters happening. So because my file is in stereo, I'm going to leave my input in stereo and I'm going to leave my output to stereo because I'm sending my track to the stereo output. Now, when the input is in stereo, I can control how narrow I want my sound to behave. So I'm just going to mute the dry and I'm going to play with the width so that you can hear the difference between mono, narrow, and wide. you can expand or contract the width of your stereo sound. And this can also be a useful tool for when you want to make a stutter a bit more localized or less localized. Now, as I told you before, our buffer can be up to 20 seconds. So I'm just going to increase my buffer all the way to 20 seconds. And I'm just going to increase the buoyance so that I can have sound in all my dimensional planes. And I'm just going to do something, again, random and see what happens. Okay, this sounds hypnotizing. So, because my buffer is of 20 seconds, it is randomly grabbing sound from up to 20 seconds in the past. So like this, you increase the variations that you're gonna have into your stutters. Now, let's just move on and work with A/B stutter in something that is rhythmical. So if we listen to this track, we have an arpeggio that is happening at 120 BPM. And since I'm working with a tempo-based sound, I'm gonna insert A/B stutter, and I'm gonna work with A/B stutter using my tempo synced rate. So if I press play as soon as I insert it, you can hear that it's giving you rhythmic stutters, which is super cool. If I mute the dry and play only the stutters, it sounds very cool. So now I'm just going to work on something like I did with the previous tracks, but because this time I'm using an arpeggio that is at 120, all my stutters are going to be tempo-based. So I'm going to increase the buoyance so that I can work with all my dimensional planes. I'm going to increase my buffer size. And I'm going to loop it because my arpeggio is not that long. Okay, it's 1 minute, but if I run out of time, I want to continue working with it. And let's see what we can do. Okay, so this sounds fantastic. Like for something so simple like an arpeggio, I can really expand it and make all this weird color in the sound that is something that really you don't hear very often. And this could be something that could add a lot of value to whatever you're working on, regardless if it's music or if it's sound design. Now I'm going to insert my plugin in a track that is already immersive. It comes in first order ambisonics. Know that AB Stutter is compatible with first, second, and third order ambisonics. So whatever you throw at it, pretty much, it's going to make it work. So before inserting my stutter, let's hear what we have here. Okay, so these are some chants in a church. Let's add AB Stutter to my track. And because my track is a first order ambisonics track, the input is set to ambisonics and the output is set to ambisonics because it is Nuendo, the one who's going to take care of its decoding. I'm going to mute the dry. And this is a pretty long file, 4 minutes, so no need to loop. And also, I don't really need to use the buoyants because I am already getting information in all the dimensional planes. But nonetheless, I'm going to give buoyants just to see what can happen, you know? Let me increase the buffer as well, and let's see how this sounds. Okay, so this sounds pretty interesting. So if you are interested in working in Dolby Atmos, you can continue watching this video. I'm going to grab the project from the beginning and I'm going to work in Atmos. So first, let me just remove the AB Stutter plugin from all the tracks, because for Atmos, I am working a bit differently. And now let me convert this project to a Dolby Atmos project. I will add a main mix channel, I will add a bed, and I will route everything to my bed. If you're unsure of what I'm doing and how to do all these things, there is a video in the description below where you can learn how to set your Dolby Atmos project up quickly. So to keep everything organized, let me just move the outputs to the right and let me just remove this track because I'm going to be using the renderer. And because even though I'm working in Atmos, you're going to be listening in stereo because this is YouTube, I'm just going to connect my left and my right channels. Oh, and let me just delete my stereo output. Okay, so now if I send my whisper to my standard bed, okay, it works. Let me just send everything to my bed. And this is how my Atmos project looks in the very beginning. All my tracks are routed to my standard bed, and there is nothing else going on. So I'm gonna go back to my whispers, which is going to my standard bed. And if I solo it, let me just, and I forgot in my renderer, I'm just gonna downmix everything to binaural because I'm just using headphones. So as soon as I press play, I can hear the whispers doing their thing. So now, instead of adding A/B Stutter to the whispers channel, I am going to create a new track because I might want my whispers to become an object or to move here and there. And I want to keep my A/B Stutter either in my bed or either as a separate three-dimensional object. So for that, I'm going to create a new track, which is going to be a group track. And I'm going to make sure that the track is third order ambisonics because this is how wide I want my A/B Stutter to work with. And I'm going to name it A/B Stutter. This track is going to go to my bed. And now all I did was just create a new group track, which will contain my A/B Stutter, and whatever I want to have stutter, I will send it to this track. So let's just insert A/B Stutter to that track. And now let me send my whispers to this group track. So if I press play, you can see that my A/B Stutter track is already working at 7.1.2 because this is the width of my bed. So even if I lower the volume of my original whispers, you can see that it already has three-dimensional properties. So if I were listening to this in a 7.1.4 Dolby Atmos setup, I will be hearing the stutters going on all around me. Now, based on all the controls that I explained in the previous chapter of this video, I'm just going to create something with this whispers track without listening to the dry signal. So I'm just going to increase the buoyance so that I can play with all my dimensional planes, and I'm going to lower the buffer, and I'm gonna loop it. Okay, this is cool. Now, if I convert my whispers track to an object, because this could be something that you might want to do. Let me just set my whispers to the left because it's an object. I like having everything organized. Now I can work with the signal of my objects independently from the signal of my stutters. However, because this track is so tiny, I might not have the time to show what exactly I could do with it. Yeah, this file is way too small for me to move around the spatial field. And I could duplicate it, but anyway, since I have more files, I'm just gonna move ahead to my next track. Let me just remove my send from here. And here on my next track, I'm just gonna again send it to my A/B Stutter track. And I'm going to convert it to an object. Let me just move it to the left. Okay, and now if I open this, I can see that my object is stereophonic, even though my A/B Stutter is happening three-dimensionally. And if you want to check on your renderer for Dolby Atmos, you can see that you have the whispers object and you have the pad object. So in this case, we're going to be listening to the pad object. If I press play, you can see that it is the pad object that is being activated. Okay, the screen is way too small for me to show everything I want to show. Let me just open my A/B Stutter. And now I'm going to be moving my object around, and you will see how the whole spatial stutter information changes depending on how I move my object. Let me just decrease the size of the buffer so that everything happens a bit faster, and open my object. Etc. I could stay here for hours and just, this is so hypnotizing. Okay, now let me just move on to my next object, which will be a rhythmic object. I'm gonna make an object out of it. And wait, let me just remove A/B Stutter from this track and send this track to it. Now, because this is a rhythmic track, I'm going to go back to A/B Stutter and I'm going to change all the rates to be rhythmic. So it could be 16ths, here it could be 4ths, here it could be 8ths. Okay, now let's play and see how it works. So this is pretty cool because it shows that you can use A/B Stutter in music, and it really gives a much more deep color to it. Finally, if I wanted to keep my standard bed free from the A/B Stutter and I wanted my stutter to be a completely independent object track, what I could do is just create a new group track, which is going to be 714. And I'm going to name it Stutter Object. I'm going to route my Stutter track to that track. And finally, I'm going to convert this track to an object. And that way, I am sure that my whole stutter effect is not going through the bed, but it is a completely independent and three-dimensional object. So let me just move this to the left just to keep it organized. Now my stutter track is an object. So now not only do I have control of the spatial properties from within A/B Stutter, but I also have control from the properties that Dolby Atmos has to offer. So if I go again to my arpeggio, let me just move it a little bit to the center. And if I press play, etc. I could stay here for hours and hours and hours, and it will always give me something interesting to work with. And finally, if you were in a 714 setup, all you will do is just put this to 714, and if you pressed play, you can see that all my project is already fully compatible with spatial audio. This is the beautiful thing about our products, that no matter if you're working in mono, in stereo, in surround, in Dolby Atmos, or even if you have a dome with 50 speakers all around you, you can natively adapt our plugins because they contain an infinite acoustic sphere from which you can grab the sound and you can generate as many speakers as you want. It is something that really, really is worth listening to. So we hope you enjoyed this video, and we hope you enjoy A/B Stutter if you go for it. And if you have any suggestions or any questions about the plugin or about any of my processes, please do not hesitate on leaving a comment below, and I will do my best to go deeper in whatever doubt you might have. Thank you so much for watching, and see you on the next one.